Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. It's time for another episode of the Bird's Eye View with me, Andrew Musgrove, and the Mirror's Simon Bird. Coming to you in the week after Newcastle's 1-0 defeat to Brighton up at St James's Park. We're going to look at the bigger picture. Was there anything from that performance and the performances that we've seen so far this season that leads us down a path to what Newcastle United might do, not only in January, but the summer to come as well? Please remember to give the video a thumbs up, hit subscribe on the podcast channel, leave a rating and review. Let's get on with the show. Simon, you well?
I'm okay. I sound better than you. You had a cold?
Yeah, I've had a cold. I'm not going to bore the listeners with another update.
Poor Andrew's got the snivels.
I'm fighting through it though. You well?
Good. I'm okay, thanks. Yeah, I had a day off yesterday and I went up Simonside Hill in Northumberland with the dog. I had a thoroughly lovely day.
Lovely. Very jealous of that. I don't think I would make it halfway up the way my lungs are feeling at the moment.
Look at that. At least you're still talking though.
Yeah.
About Newcastle.
Well, yeah, we're going to try and find some positives. Now, Simon gave me a list of things he wanted to talk about.
Thanks.
And there is a lot to talk about, and you guys are not going to want to miss a moment of this podcast. Before we do that, I want to say thank you to our sponsor, NORD VPN, which is the best protection possible for all your devices, especially when you're out in public. And Simon, when you're out traveling, do you ever worry about scammers getting into your devices?
All the time. You see what nation states do to people's emails and WhatsApps and stuff. So maybe I'll have to have a look at that.
Most certainly.
NordVPN, did you say?
I did. NordVPN, and we've got a very special offer for you guys, and you can find the link to that in the podcast description. Just go to nordvpn.com/tune. Try it now, risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. It's an exclusive NordVPN deal for our listeners and to our viewers. And there's loads of other benefits as well, aside from the protection that it offers you. You can switch your virtual location, allowing you to save money by purchasing flights, hotels, and subscriptions from other countries at a cheaper price. And everyone loves a bargain. One NordVPN account can be used up to 10 devices, and it costs less than a premium cup of coffee. So what's not to love? In the podcast description is where you will find that link. I use it myself. It really does give me that peace of mind when I'm out and about that no one's going to get my financial details or any of the great content that we're producing. So do take us up on that offer. Simon, I'm going to start with a phrase that you texted me when I asked you what you want to talk about, and it was that the squad needs ripping up.
Yeah. Well, I think, the season's been a bit flat. It's not been disastrous. Newcastle are 9th. They've got a few points. Not scoring as many goals as they were last year. 8. It's about 6 worse in the Premier League. All the attacking metrics are down. And it just provoked. I was thinking about it on Sunday after the match against Brighton. And I was contemplating whether the place has gone a bit stale and whether it needs a proper revamp and a proper spark up in this window and the next window. And that's the challenge ahead for Eddie Howe, Paul Mitchell and the club, to find the finances and to find the players. And I think there's a little bit of impatience from fans, and rightly so, with certain players who Eddie and the club persist with, who aren't really delivering that next level performance, that sustained like top 4, top 6 performance, which has got to be where they're targeting. It's where they say themselves they're targeting. So I think there's a list of players there. We went through the squad later on. There are players there who should be at risk of being moved on in January, and whether that's unsettling for everyone, that's like kind of tough. There are they need to sell well to then buy well. And I think the excuse that we've heard is the PSR excuse is kind of valid. We know it's there, but there was still 60 million bids going in at the end of the window in August, and they didn't come off. And then if you sell well on top of that, and you sell the right players, you should be able to get a healthy pot to properly rejig that squad. And I think the time is coming, especially if they have a little rocky run in the next 3-4 games, which are very tough games. That is going to be on the agenda. So I think we're kind of ahead of the agenda here, and I think that's what people are going to be talking about in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
The issue is, though, that January is notorious for being a very difficult market, not only to buy, but to sell as well. I think clubs are aware that prices tend to be inflated. So if you are going for a real revamp, it's easier said than done.
It's easier said than done. But then if you're offering very decent players for sale yourself, then you can get a premium for 2, 3, 4 players, however they can churn this squad around. I mean, when Mitchell did that interview with us all about, was it 6 weeks ago now, he was talking about kind of 3 players per window, a churn of 3 players per window. If you could do that in January, then that's the kind of job that Newcastle should be doing now, because it doesn't get cozy because they're kind of professional and they want to do well, but you need fresh blood in there to switch everyone on in training, to switch everyone on and to feel a little bit under threat with themselves, to raise their own performances. And like, a signing doesn't just add the new signings talent, it kind of switches everyone on and gets them excited a bit as well. And I also think to hang on to their best players or their biggest assets, Isaac, Bruno and Tonali, who have been promised, trophy challenges and challenges in the top 6 of the Premier League. To keep those players happy, Newcastle are going to have to start proving that they're building a squad which can do that. And I think the churn and the rip up is going to have to happen soon.
Is there an argument that they're going to have to sell for less? You're going to have certain players which you might say are available to go, but Newcastle United, if they're going to do this revamp, they might not get maybe the market value for those players. But is it more important to just raise funds and get certain players out of the door?
Well, there's a give and take, isn't there? There's the price you can agree, but also it's you're taking wages off the books, and it depends who you're selling. If who you're selling stock has gone down, you'll accept a cut price, but they will also have a contract with Newcastle, which they might not be able to get in the later stages of their career with their next club. So there might be there's a trade-off there to do in terms of compensating the player who's going for the remainder of his contract if he's not getting that same contract at his next club. Or if you're selling an asset on the up, Bruno maybe, Isaac certainly, Tonali maybe he's kind of on a flat line at the minute, value-wise. Then maybe you can tweak the finances in your own favour. But the deals seem to be hard to do and hard to agree for Newcastle. In the other clubs, you see them getting 2, 3, 4 players in simultaneously. Now Newcastle in the last few windows, they seem to be on one target, and then it moves on to the next one, and that takes ages. And I don't know whether that's a sign-off problem with Saudi Arabia or whether just deals are complicated and difficult to get done these days. I don't know, but they need to have, right at the start of the window, they need to say, is Mark Gahey going to join? Do they want him? Can they do the deal early in January? If they can't do the deal early in January, just walk away from it. If they want to do that deal still for a cut price from what they bid from the summer. So Mark Gahey, number one, if that's who they want to look at, can they do it in the first week? If not, tell Palace they're not getting the 50 million. Newcastle are moving on, and we'll see. That'll be an interesting test for Palace, for Steve Parish and their shareholders who lost out on getting 60 million in for Gahey in the summer. And we were hearing rumours that, those shareholders at Palace weren't 100% well, they were questioning what, they didn't get that money in. It was a big offer. So try and do that deal and then move on quickly to other deals as well.
Some would say, though, do you really want to, as you've put it, rip up the squad in January, midway through the season? Is that not a bit of a gamble?
It is a gamble, because we know, Newcastle fans know that when Eddie Howe signs a player, he talks of there being a process to turn him into a Newcastle player, and that usually takes like 2 or 3 months. But if you're looking in a long-term view, if they're 9th at the minute, if they're still mid-table, slightly off the top 6, why persist with stagnation, or why persist with that? You have to shake it up somehow. And the last time they did it was at desperation stakes when Eddie Howe had just taken over and they were in the relegation zone and the takeover just happened, and they did good business then. So it's not like there's not good business to be done in January. They must know that there are some decent targets out there. Why not do it now? Integrate the players, have them ready for next summer, and then next season you're looking immediately. You've got a head start instead of having too much pressure on the summer window. Every window is a big opportunity as well as a risk.
You said just a moment ago that as soon as the window opens, they need to decide right there and then, Mark Gee, is he coming or is he not? What do you think they're doing between now and then to make sure that they hit the ground running? Because again, a lot of people would say, well, actually, I don't want that question asked on the 1st of January.
No, of course
I
not.
want that question asked,
Yeah.
now, the 22nd of October. I want to know whether he's coming as soon as that window opens.
Yeah, well, they will. I mean, I'm sure it's not like the window opens and then they say what's available. There's constantly, every week, there'll be scouts meetings. They'll be narrowing targets down. They're trying to be better on data. They're not leading. They're not. Eddie Howe says himself, they're not cutting edge and leading on that at the minute, but they're trying to get it better in terms of analyzing players' performance and who's undervalued. That's one of the things Mitchell wanted to do. So they will be working every week on targets. They'll be discussing behind the scenes targets every week. And then I think minds get focused kind of mid-November, December time, when you really are boiling down what position do Newcastle need? Who can they create a market for? Who can they raise money from? And also who they can buy. So it's not like it is happening all the time. It's not just a process which gets switched on.
Do you think, because the summer was particularly bad, and we are seeing now the effects of that on Eddie Howe's team? He hasn't really got the game changers on the bench. We were speaking off camera about how there's no way in an ideal world Alexander Isak would have played on Saturday. There's no way he would have played 90 minutes. But Eddie Howe has not got the options to make sure that doesn't happen. That will lead to some pressure. It has led to some scrutiny of Paul Mitchell already. That very fact, do you think that pushes him? That'll be his drive to make sure that January is a success?
Well, I mean, Paul Mitchell's got the job. He doesn't want to not sign big players that will make him look, which will strengthen the club and strengthen his position at the club. So he's going to want to shake things up. I'm pretty sure he's going to want to make an impact in the next window and the one after to show that he's doing a good job as a sporting director and helping the manager with players that hopefully they both agree. But there's always that tension between what the club wants to buy and a sporting director thinks could work and what a manager wants. But hopefully those things become aligned behind the scenes. And he's going to want to make a splash, I think. Not wasting money or necessarily spending 60 million on a player splash, but he's going to want to start doing clever deals because that's what he's going to be judged on.
And what lessons do you think he will have taken from the summer into his preparation for January?
Don't get strung along too long by a club who's a selling club, and at some point walk away earlier, maybe pretend you're still in for that player, but then do a deal elsewhere and just be ruthless about that. I mean, we don't know exactly the demands of Eddie Howe and whether Gay was the only target and that was the only one they could get. It was the only one who could improve the team. They need to buy players that improve the team, but also have a bit of value. So have a bit of future value. So Newcastle can't just buy players for 50, 60 million saying they're going to improve the team. They need to buy under that as well and younger. In terms of, you look at Brighton the other day, the lad they had, where is he? Carlos Baleba, he was a shielding central midfielder and ran the show, and everything went through him, and he was a destroyer, and he was athletic, and he came from Lille. He's Cameroonian, he's only 20. I mean, that was a good buy for Brighton. Newcastle need that kind of thing. It doesn't have to be the next big thing that everyone's talking about that Newcastle buy.
Well, that's the issue, isn't it? Because one of the criticism that is laid at the door of Eddie Howe, and perhaps unfairly, is that he's got a preference over Premier League experience and more than often than not, English players, which isn't necessarily true because you look, Tonali, you look at Bruno. But there is an argument that maybe they need to go back to try and find these bargains over in Europe, in France, in Germany, in Italy. It doesn't need to be the 50, 60 million pound signing. It just needs to be someone with talent and ability where they've gone out and scouted for 3-4 months and they've gone, he's the man that can really just elevate Newcastle.
Yeah, they've got. I mean, they don't have to. It doesn't have to be the next big star player they sign. It has to be people who are like Mitchell spoke about this 6 weeks ago, saying they've not been very good at getting the undervalued players under the radar, and that's because maybe they haven't. Everyone is clamoring now for. There are a lot of firms around who do the data analysis, have millions of pieces of information about players in every game they've played all around the world, and they have algorithms which spot the bargains and can be tailored to what a club needs in a certain position. Now we need to ask Eddie Howe exactly what Newcastle are doing in terms of that, whether they're kind of into that or whether they're a bit behind on that. But a lot of clubs are clamoring for those data-based football firms and betting firms, because they could be used for betting purposes as well, the algorithms, and whether that can be tailored to Newcastle and used to find bargains. And they've got to get into that as well. I mean, it's an arms race. One person does it and it works, and everyone starts to do it. So it kind of nullifies the effect, but it can take the risk out of signings. Newcastle need to be in there, finding the gem 22-year-old player in maybe the lower reaches of the French league who could actually be brilliant, and turned into a Premier League player and have the physicality and have the, all that stuff's analysed by data and computers these days. And the information is there. They've just got to get out there and do the deals and make it work.
Another thing you said to me was a £100 million revamp in January. Now, if you look at the prices and then you apply the January tax and then the Newcastle United tax, which unfortunately is a real thing, and that probably gets you maybe 2-3 top quality players at a push, do you think?
Yeah, and also if you're talking about spending 100 million, they probably haven't got that in the coffers now, but could they have 100 million if they sold? And we can go down the squad later, and everyone will have the names who they would sell, but they could sell people. I mean, they could sell an asset, but I don't think they'll sell it one of the big assets. But they could sell a substitute asset. For instance, if you're looking to raise money now, where are Newcastle strongest? The strongest on the left wing. So you've got Anthony Gordon, who's the number one, and if he signs a new contract, he's not going to be leaving in January. But you've got Harvey Barnes. And I'm pretty sure Harvey Barnes is fairly unhappy at the minute in terms of not starting every game, not starting in his favourite position, because we know his favourite position is left wing. If you're Harvey Barnes, you want to play and you've got the talent to play, and he's scored goals this year. Now, Newcastle, one of the weird things about the transfers in the last couple of years is they had Anthony Gordon and they signed Harvey Barnes as well. Why do that? Why spend that much money on two people in the same position? That's why I didn't quite understand that, although Harvey Barnes is a good player. So if you're looking to raise money, will someone take Harvey Barnes off you for 40 million, 45 million, make a profit on him?
Has he done enough that Newcastle could put that price tag on his head?
I think he has done, yeah, but he's not got the starting chances, and he wants to be a main man for a player. Now, I'm sure there are people in the Premier League who would be excited by that potential to sign Harvey Barnes. Can they create a market for him? I don't know. I mean, I don't know whether this is a club policy. This is me thinking, if you're looking to cash in on an asset, raise money, and get a couple of big deals done, you've got to sell someone with that actually value. And Harvey Barnes, if he's unhappy, might be. If he's unhappy at what he's getting, the opportunity he's getting at Newcastle, which he probably is, because he thinks he should start. He might be the one.
I can see the logic in that and why you're putting that forward. I just can't see Eddie Howe sanctioning that deal. But then that leads you on to another question: is how does the dynamic work? Because we saw in the summer all that tension. Now, thankfully, that looks like that's been worked out. But this is going to be the first transfer window where we're going to find out whether it has or not. So how do you think the dynamic's going to work in January?
Well, I think this January is the next two windows are a big test for Eddie Howe and his natural decency and his loyalty and his love for his players. He loves his players and he loves making them better. But at some point, Eddie Howe has got to show an absolute ruthless side. And he's got to say to a player who he might love as a personality, he might love working with, might love as part of the team dynamic, he's going to have to show them the door to raise money and say, you're not entirely what we need. There's a big money offer for you on the table, and you're going to go. I mean, he kind of did it with Elliot Anderson and Minter, who he probably hadn't worked with very much, but he did it in the summer, kind of sanctioning those deals with other people, although they probably shouldn't have sold Elliot Anderson in hindsight. But Eddie Howe's got to show that ruthless side, and the loyalty that he's got with the players who have done so well for him for 2 years. At some point, that's got to be broken.
Do you think he's prepared, and do you think he's going to be able to handle maybe Paul Mitchell knocking on his office door and saying, "Look, I know you love this player, Callum Wilson, for example. I know you want to keep him, but West Ham have come in with a bid of £10 million. We are selling them, and it's a little bit different to what happened in the summer, because Newcastle United needed to sell Minter, they needed to sell Anderson. Whether they only need to sell now to raise funds to spend, they haven't got the backs against the wall in terms of the PSR accounts and a points deduction hanging over the head. It's a total different knock on the office door. Do you think he's ready for that?
Well, it depends. He has to be ready for it because he's a football manager. Ultimately, if he wants players in and to revamp the squad, which he presumably he must do, he's going to have to accept selling players or getting rid of players like Callum Wilson, despite Callum Wilson being one of his favourites, and he speaks about him being elite and a brilliant person around the camp. If Callum Wilson's not fit, he's no use to Newcastle United. It's really bad to say. I love Callum Wilson. I've done some lovely interviews with him in the past. But if he's not fit and he can't contribute, and you've got a market for him at some price, you get his wages off the books, you get a bit of money in for him, which would be almost pure profit at this stage on the PSR, then you take the deal. You probably take the deal and look and replace him elsewhere. But I think Eddie Howe's decision would be not just to have his squad reduced and sold off. It needs to come as a package, and it needs to be like, we're going to sell this player, the money's going to this one, and it's going to leave you stronger. And that'll be the calculation that if Paul Mitchell is trying to strike those deals, he's got to give that calculation to Eddie Howe, and that's where the agreement would come.
So in terms of who goes because as much as you say the squad needs ripping up, it needs a revamp, it is January, so you're not going to get that done wholly in that month. It's probably going to have to be done over maybe the next 2 windows, maybe the next 4 windows, where you'll see a total kind of change in personnel. Who are the main names for you who may go in January?
Who would you sell in January? Well, I've already said the one. I've always said that I think if you're looking to get rid of a 35-40 million asset to raise money to strengthen elsewhere, I would say Harvey Barnes. You could get a market for him. That's a surprise, but that'll be an unusual signing, unusual deal. But it might be one of the out of the blue.
Joe Willock for me.
Joe Willock,
interesting one. He's a brilliant talent, but he's another one where I don't think you can rely on him in terms of his fitness and his injury record. And it's such a shame because he could be so special. We've seen it in glimpses, but if someone comes in with a decent amount of money for him, for me, I would be pushing towards the door.
Well, I think you might wait till the summer. He's got 2 years left on his deal this summer. You might want to see if he gets fit, because he's coming back from a long injury with his calf and stuff. If he can gradually get fitter, you can't judge him on his first games back. If 2 months' time he's still not really delivering, that running power is not there anymore, then he might be one of the people. Trippier, can you get money for Saudi Arabia from him? I mean, I think Trippier should be in the first team, and when he's fit, he is. But also he's not fit again. How long is this hamstring injury going to last? Okay, so he's in doubt. He might want to go. He might find a better deal for himself elsewhere. Botman, no. Shaw. I mean, I think you're keeping Fabian Shaw. You're not going to get an awful lot of money for him. It'd be more expensive to find the same kind of player. So you're going to extend his contract. Jamal Lascelles, coming back from injury, so you probably can't sell him immediately. I mean, he's a good backup centre half. Whether he wants to stay and be a backup centre half, I don't know. But at some point, he'll have to go. You wouldn't be selling him in January. Joe Linton, no. Tonali's an interesting one. There was a story last week came out of Milan that Real Madrid were interested in Tonali, and the price mentioned probably wouldn't be massively acceptable to Newcastle. But Tonali hasn't ripped up any games, hasn't he? He hasn't like really showed us what he's about yet. He's had that really difficult year out. You're probably going to be a bit patient with him. And then in the summer, you're looking at Tonali thinking that's a big asset. Has it worked here? Does he still want to be here? Is he still engaged with Newcastle's project? Because it's probably not what he signed up for, going from Milan to a 9th place Premier League club. He probably thinks he's a bit bigger than that. He's running the show for Italy. I think Tonali has got a big few months ahead. I think having done the deal and spent ages on it, you probably want to persist with him. But a Vasily offer came in for him, and you had options elsewhere. I'm not saying you should sell Tonali. I think you need to persevere with him. shows flashes of brilliance, but he's got a lot to prove this season. Now he's back. Callum Wilson, you have to listen to offers for Callum Wilson in January, don't you? When you go in. Anthony Gordon, the time to sell him for 70 million was in the summer to Liverpool. You're not gonna let him go. Harvey Barnes mentioned. Matt Targett, always injured. I mean, if you can, do we need him as a back? Newcastle need him as a backup left back?
Probably not, with
Probably
Lloyd
not.
Kelly there and Lewis Hall performing well.
He's
So
third or fourth choice, so Dan Burn can play there. So Matt Targett can probably move on, but that doesn't raise you much money, does it? Kraft, they probably keep him as a backup.
I think
you
so.
think? I mean, it's more expensive to replace. Asula's just learning. Hall, no. Livramento, no. Pope. Oh, Odious
Lacademos.
Thank you for that, because I always get that wrong. Can't pronounce it. I mean, in January, you're probably going to move him on. You spent a PSR fiddled 20 million on him in the Anderson deal. He's not going to play games. He's Greek's number one. He would presumably be loaned out in January to create free places up. Pope, no. Jacob Murphy, I mean, he started 6 games this year, and he's been at the club ages, and he plays a good game now and then, and he seems to be a favoured runner of Eddie Howe, but they need to upgrade that position, really. And I don't know. I mean, I don't know what he adds. He adds great attitude. He's fast. He does the odd good pass, but I mean, really, you need to be him or Almiron, who's got to be sold in January or traded if they want to raise money to revamp the squad. Almiron and Jacob Murphy.
How much are you asking for Jacob Murphy? You know, if you're picking up the phone to potential buying clubs, and who are you picking the phone up to as well? I mean, is Jacob Murphy someone that you can see a bottom half club spending the best part of 15-20 million pounds on in January?
I mean, I do think he's more reliable than Almiron. So I would
You'd sell Almiron
before Murphy. Yeah,
but again,
Murphy as a sub coming on late in the game with his running power and his speed could help change a game on the break. So that he's so maybe I'm a bit harsh there. If you could sell Almiron before him, I just think Almiron's very unreliable at the minute. He's not creating chances, not scoring goals.
I think Almiron is the one where they're going to have to take a hit on. I mean, when Charlotte came to the table, I think they were still asking 20 million pounds or so for Almiron. I think he's in the same boat as Callum Wilson. You've just got to lower your asking price 10 to 15 million pounds and just say, thank you very much. Great serving. It's been fun. But off you go. We'll clear the wages off the books. And I think Newcastle are going to have to do this with a lot of players. They're just going to have to accept that their initial asking price, even though it is close to maybe what other clubs are getting for similar players, just take the hit and just raise whatever you can for these players who are on long deals or on big wages. It's better to get them out the door if there's takers for them rather than holding them onto them and then the value decreasing anyway in a year's time.
Totally agree. I totally agree with that. You've got to take the hit and just churn things up a little bit and create those gaps in the squad for other people to come in, and then you're better placed for the summer to move ahead. And finances are better in the summer when you're doing the PSR calculations in the end of June. So yeah, he's probably one of the most vulnerable as well. And then you're looking at, I mean, Kelly's going to stay. Willock, you've already mentioned. It's a good shout. I'd give him the rest of the season to prove himself. And then if not in the summer, you're looking at a bit of churn there. Dan Burns signed his new contract, part of the leadership group. He stays. He backs up too many positions, and his play has very good games when they're under the cosh. Then there's a couple of difficult one there. Sean Longstaff. Now, there's some really interesting stats by our colleague Chris Woff, your former colleague, highlighting out today, highlighting how many when Longstaff is in the team, Newcastle win a lot more, a bigger percentage of games than when they're not in the team. And all the stats are suggesting that Longstaff, even though he has limitations to his game, is actually quite important to Newcastle in terms of winning games and getting over the line. And he adds balance to the midfield. But is he going to get Newcastle to the next level? I mean, I don't think I would sell him yet. But he needs to sort. I mean, he's in a contract situation as well, whether it needs extending or not. And he also represents that horrible term, pure profit for PSR. So a homegrown lad, much more valuable on given the PSR headroom if they sell him. But who's paying 30 million for Sean? I don't know. Maybe, and eventually, I think he probably wants to play in America and have an experience of that with his brother. But you don't give up playing for your hometown club. I mean, I don't think he'd be selling. I think he'd be keeping Sean Longstaff because he adds balance to the midfield. But if he's not in the team, he's not one of those players who can come on as a sub and change a game. So, and Eddie Howe spoke on Saturday after the Brighton game how he made his substitutions and the substitutions just had no impact on them chasing the game. And I think when you look at who's on the bench, you need people who can come off the bench and add spark. And I think Sean's more of a substitute, comes on when you're ahead and can just help shut down a game rather than win a game. So maybe that's not correct. Alex Murphy in the squad, but he needs to play games, and he almost got loaned to Portugal a couple of years ago, and that didn't come off because they had to keep him in house. But he probably needs to be loaned out and get experience so he can come back next summer and challenge. Bruno, there were no offers in it for the summer, were there? So you're not gonna make massive money out of Bruno unless someone's panic buying in January. And Lewis Miley, you're bringing back in the squad. So there's only a few there who you can sell. But if you sell 2 or 3 and all that money adds up, and then you've already got 60 million in the kitty anyway from the summer, then you have 100 million pounds to kind of revamp and get your main target, a right winger or a centre back, probably a right winger, and then a couple of others. And then you're doing the 3-player churn that Mitchell has spoken about.
I think Harvey Barnes is probably the big one that you've mentioned there. I think everyone would like to see Almiron go. The majority would probably cash it on Callum Wilson if they could find a buyer. But Harvey Barnes is probably the one that our listeners and viewers will have a bit of a debate about, and let us know in the comments. Would you
not because he's a bad player, just because he's not getting
just it's just what's right for the club.
What's right for the club and what's right for the player as well, because he wants to play.
It's just January though. I can't see Newcastle United actually doing a lot of business in January, either ins or outs, even though I think they need it. And I can't see there being too many suitors for any of these players really, because I think Newcastle United will ask. I think they'll not maybe intentionally, but I think they will price the likes of Murphy or Almiron out of a move, maybe even Callum Wilson, because they'll have in their mindset a certain evaluation, which isn't necessarily wrong, but not a valuation that other clubs want to pay for these players, especially in January, because you've got to remember that the accounting period's April, so that creeps up on you as well quite quickly. So I don't know. They need to sell, they need to buy, but I can see January being another disappointment. If I'm being totally honest.
Really. Okay, so here's one which would shake it up. Liverpool probably don't need Anthony Gordon now because they've got Diaz playing so well, but they're top of the league. They'll want to strengthen. They can offer Champions League football and potentially a title win. If you're Liverpool, would you come in for Anthony Gordon and offer Newcastle 70 million? Would Anthony Gordon take it? Would as Newcastle, if you're mid-table, not really hitting the European, would you take it and then reinvest?
We've had lots of positive comments about your arrival to the podcast, Simon. But one of the probably the only negative that I've had is your valuation of Anthony Gordon.
Oh, was it? Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, undervaluing at 70 million.
Yeah.
You probably are. And he's an England player. He's a forward. You're probably looking at near 85, 90.
I think you're looking closer to 100 million.
You're looking at 100 million for Anthony Gordon?
Yeah. I think if you compare Jack Grealish to Anthony Gordon, Jack Grealish costs you 100 million pounds. I think Anthony Gordon
more
is
effective.
Yeah. So for me, if Liverpool came knocking in January, assuming Gordon has signed that new deal, which we believe is pretty much done, we're just waiting for it to be announced.
Yeah.
I think they would have to come to the table to get Newcastle to even consider it. They would have to be offering over 100 million pounds, and even then, I think Newcastle might go, well, actually, when he's playing on the left, he's Newcastle United's best player.
He's too important. He's the best player every week. Yeah. And it's very hard to replace.
I think there are other big name players who could fetch a lot of value that are more at risk of being sold to raise huge funds than Anthony Gordon, because I think Anthony Gordon alongside Alexander Isak are the two that you really need to keep. And then you get into that midfield three and you look at Bruno, you look at Joe Linton, you look at Tonali. For me, Bruno is a fantastic player.
Yeah.
But if you're asking me whether I'm accepting 120 million for Well, to be fair, I don't think
Well, you wouldn't get
I don't think
you wouldn't
anyone's
get that.
I don't think anyone's coming close to offering 100 million for Bruno Guimaraes. To
No,
be quite
I
honest with you,
think 70 or 80 is probably the ceiling, if that.
and
At the minute,
I do actually think Newcastle would consider 80 million pounds for Bruno. If
Yes.
someone offered 80 million pounds for Anthony Gordon, I think they'd laugh them out of the room.
I think that's probably spot on. Actually, I think you're right. You're right. I mean, 70. Yeah, sorry. I issue a public apology to anyone who's offended by my 70 million pound valuation of Anthony Gordon. You've talked me round. I'm not a ruthless businessman. I'm a kind man. So yeah, I need to be more ruthless on the valuation of Gordon.
But you did also text in our like research for the show. You said big sales. So assuming you mean by that,
Yeah.
and and Isaac, a Bruno, a Joe Linton, a Gordon, one of those. Are you saying one of those is potentially at risk of going in January or the summer?
Maybe, but we don't know what the state of the market is. I mean, people had all summer to sign Bruno, didn't they, for that release clause?
Why do you think they didn't? Because 100 million pounds on the face of it for is that it? Yeah,
I think that's
it's not worth it.
For him. I don't think last season he was worth that. I think he was good at the weekend. Actually, I thought he had one of his better half hours, first halves against Brighton. I think he looked a bit brighter. I don't know if I think he's another issue is it might be a bit burdened by the captaincy. I don't think that's got an extra 10% out of him, but it's kept him at the club. I mean, you don't want to sell your best players, but Newcastle fans and the club are going to have to stomach at some point Newcastle selling one of their top-notch players. And it'll hurt, and it'll be horrible, and it'll create a bit of dissent. But every club's done it on that journey to the top. Liverpool did it. Teams lose big players. It's about reinvesting it properly and creating something. You can't just be permanently loyal to those players who got Newcastle to the Champions League. And it sadly, because they'll always be remembered for that brilliant season. But you can't just think they're going to do it again. They're not going. It's a different season, different dynamics. Rivals get stronger, and the Premier League is getting stronger than ever, especially in that middle group. At some point, you're going to have to sell. I would class Harvey Barnes as a big sale because he would raise a decent chunk of money.
I asked you whether Eddie Howe was ready for that awkward knock at the door. Do you think our fan bases, the listeners and viewers watching this, and then the wider Newcastle United fan base are ready for those tough decisions that are going to have to come, not only to those players, who make a nice story like Dan Burn, for example, who's not going to go anywhere, but I'm just using an example because he's someone who's really, really well liked. You've got that side of things, but also for a sale of a star.
Yeah. Well, every fan has we all have our favourites, and they change kind of week to week. I think it would be less painful if they're mid-table and the whole chemistry and things hasn't been right, or the team isn't clicking or delivering what everyone hopes Newcastle can be. So it'll be less painful if they end up in December in 10th place, 9th, 10th place, and they're bumping around, a point ahead of Bournemouth and Brentford, and a little bit behind Forest, or that if they're then bracketed in that mid-table area, then I think most fans will think there is a need to rejig this, to shake it up and see what happens. And I think at some point they will shake it up.
We're talking about as well Newcastle United maybe being tempted by a certain bid for a certain star. What we haven't actually discussed is the fact that they might be forced into it by a player knocking on the door, not necessarily in January, but maybe next summer if European football hasn't been achieved.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, is Alexander Isak going to be? I mean, I know he missed chances and he's partly to blame for not winning the other day. Anthony Gordon's going to want to play in Europe because that's how he's going to get better on the international stage as well. I mean, that Champions League music, when it starts playing this week, midweek tonight and Wednesday, really a big allure for the fans. When it comes to March and they see their England mates or their big stars from their countries playing in those last 16 games and the last 8 games of Europe with so much jeopardy on them, and so many historic moments to be made on the football pitch, and they're desperately trying to get 7th place to get into the Europa Conference League. Maybe they'll have a run in the cups, hopefully. But players get jealous of their mates and they want to play at the top level. They've got an element of loyalty to Newcastle, and there'll be contractual ties which make it difficult to leave. But I mean, players could end up knocking on the door.
Let me present you then two scenarios. The first one is that Newcastle United are, for whatever reason, 11th, 12th come the January transfer window. What do they do in terms of both sales and incomings in that window in January?
I think you start building for the season after. I mean, it depends if they're in the cups. They can still have a good cup run in the FA Cup run. A lot depends on next week. Chelsea at home. A lot of big clubs still in the Carabao Cup. That's not going to be a walkover. But they need runs. They need to keep us journalists and fans excited and keep some jeopardy in the season.
If they were 11th and 12th, would we be talking about Eddie Howe preparing the team for next season?
I don't know. We'd have to see where they finished. I don't think Eddie Howe's going to be going anywhere this season.
No, I don't.
I mean, that's just nonsense. But Eddie Howe will want to see, and so will the club, what the next plan is. It's kind of a rebuild. I think what we're trying to say with this whole podcast is that they've had a great first phase of the takeover. They've turned from a bottom six, mid-table, lower mid-table, upper mid-table club into a club which now has ambition and wants to challenge for trophies and be in Europe, like everyone, like 12 clubs probably else in the Premier League, elsewhere. Now they've got a team which has gelled and was brilliant. Now it's not quite gelling. There were signs of improvements in the first half against Brighton. Massive games next week, which could completely change our mood. We're up for our mood being changed and things being more optimistic. But at the end of the season, everyone will want to see what the plan is. Where's the investment? What's the manager going to do to make this investment work? Whether he agrees with the level of club investment, I think it is. It's quite a big 6 months for the next phase of the Newcastle takeover, I think.
If Newcastle United are 5th, 6th, and they're chasing down that Champions League spot, we saw under Mike Ashley, of course, they signed Pape Cisse in the hope that they would get Champions League football. It didn't quite work out like that. But do you think this ownership are reactive to what they see in front of them, or do you think the plan won't deviate regardless of whether they're 5th and 2 points off, or regardless of whether they're 10th and 8 points off?
In terms of the summer?
In terms of January first off.
If Newcastle put a run together and beat Chelsea twice and then beat Arsenal at home, and then they really are up there challenging again, within the financial constraints, I think they've got to be looking. Then they can probably buy better players and more easily because they're up there in the Premier League, up there high in the Premier League. Everything's cumulative, so better you're doing, the more players will want to join. I mean, they got Tonali because they were in the Champions League that summer, and that's the only reason why they could persuade Tonali. So, and will they put in more money to kind of? Will they put more money in to try and spark the team up? Maybe. Or maybe at that point, if it's clicked in their 5th, they don't need it. They can wait till the summer and the powder's dry and really go for it in the summer.
Interesting. Let us know in the comments what you will think will happen. So in terms of January, then, let's talk about the position that you think they will strengthen. I think everyone has pretty much got at least 2 positions in their head. But the first priority for you in January?
I think you're looking at a goal-scoring, assist-making, productive right winger who can fit into the team as quickly as possible, who's an athlete, a runner, takes his defensive duties seriously, but can smash it head on the break. I think that's the priority. If Sven Botman comes back successfully, I don't know if you're looking at a centre-half. If he can come back in end of November, I think the time scale is, or start of December, and actually look strong, look like the player of old, then him and Shaw is a good partnership. But you might be looking, if the deal's right, to upgrade the right centre-half position. But will you be turning to Palace and then spending 60 million on Mark Gay? I don't know if you are. But if you have 2 centre-halves as strong who are stronger and faster than the current pair playing now, then you can gamble further forward. So when Newcastle were playing, it's a bit like Tottenham now. They've got such pacey centre-halves. They play with 2 at the back, and everyone else has gone forward or tucked into midfield, and you have much more of a front-footed on the ball position. Whereas Newcastle now can't quite do that. And what they did in the season, they got fourth. They risked it, and they only had 2 covering at the back, and the fullbacks could bomb on, and then maybe a midfielder slightly sitting in. But you can't do that with Shaw or in Burn because the pace isn't there. You've got to protect them a little bit more elsewhere. So you're not. So that might have an impact on the goals that Newcastle scoring this year. So I do think if you got a faster and a good ball playing centre half who is faster than Fabius Schär and a bit more physical, then that's a way of not only strengthening the defence, it's strengthening the way Newcastle could play on the ball as well.
Yeah, allowing the forward line a little bit more off the leash. In terms of that right winger, anyone that springs to mind?
Can they find an unknown, or are you going to people like Brian and Buemo or Alanga from Forest? I mean, they seem to have a relationship with Forest where they're buying and selling.
Semenyo, maybe from Bournemouth.
Semenyo's, it'd be, there's rumours that they've asked about the price for Semenyo. But then you're buying players who've already caught the eye and are at the peak. But can you get someone under the radar who can come in and become a Brian and Buemo? I don't know. That's a huge job for the scouting team. If you want ready-made, then you're looking at Alanga's physicality and Brian and Buemo's sprinting, running power, and cleverness on the ball.
I just can't look past Brian and Buemo. I think he's great. He's absolutely fantastic. He scores goals. He sets them up. He can play up front as well if need be.
Yeah.
And he's still only, I think, 24, 25. So he's still got best years ahead of him. Yes, he'll probably cost you the best part of 60 million, if not a little bit more. But I think he's proven over the last few seasons that he's a top level Premier League player. Alanga, I was very impressed with him last season. He's got a little bit more to go until he gets there, until you can, bank your house on him being an elite player. But I think he will get there. But if you want someone to hit the ground running, which I think Newcastle United do, it's got to be Mbeumo.
You need if that's your top target, you need to buy ready-made. I mean, it's okay speculating when you're doing a churn and having a couple that aren't ready-made. But if they're going to improve the team now, you go for those 2.
Do you go in for a centre forward? Move it.
Centre forward. It's hard because Isak's injured so much, or injured fairly regularly. He's brilliant when he's on song, and you think that position's buttoned down and you don't need anyone. But then he's injured, and you've got Callum Wilson injured. Can they? It was at its best when they dovetailed. One was injured. Wilson came in, scored 6 goals in 6, or whatever the stats were, and then got injured. And Isak came back and then started scoring. They kind of drive each other on, those 2. And we need to see how that pans out in the next 2 months, whether Wilson, who sounds like he's getting there almost, but they're just holding him back, whether he can stay fit. I mean, the evidence is he probably can't. And at some point, Newcastle are going to have a backup centre forward. I mean, the Aluso deal in the summer was strange. He really does look raw. He's not going to come on and change games. I just think it's a strange signing. He's not scored many goals for Sheffield. Rather, the 10 million was saved. I don't know what they were doing there. I mean, it was to get a body in, I think, which they're not going to really lose money on. They could sign again for 10 million.
So maybe bring someone in and then send them out on loan.
Yeah. But we never on these conversations, we never say, "Oh, that academy lad, he needs promoting." And I think we need to start seeing in the next couple of years. They've strengthened the academy and they've got new coaches in there. We need to start seeing the evidence of the academy filtering people in so that the backup centre forward is a 21-year-old or a 20-year-old who's banging the goals in for the under-21s. And it's done really well there. That's kind of what you need to start happening, as well as having to buy. Because if you buy, you don't want to spend like tens of millions on a backup centre forward. It's just too much. You need to develop them. Unless that goes, then you buy a centre forward in. Difficult.
It certainly is, and that's
really
why people getting paid a lot more than us will be making these decisions. Just to wrap up, then, you also text to say it's a huge 10 days for Newcastle United, playing Chelsea twice, once in the league, one in the cup, and then obviously Arsenal in the start of November. Why is it a huge 10 days?
Because you've got 2 massive Premier League tests, away at Chelsea, home to Arsenal. Never a good record against Arsenal at home. So, you've just lost your first home game to Brighton in 9 months, in 11 games, unbeaten run at home, gone in the league. So Chelsea are, I was laughing at Chelsea at the start of the season, thinking they
we
spent
all
all that
were.
money, it's all been wasted. But it actually started to look quite good. They're starting to look top 4 contenders. So they're back. They've leapfrogged back into the picture of the top 4, top 6. They're dangerous, Chelsea. Now, they never seem to do that well at Newcastle, and Newcastle seem to rattle them. And I'd really like Newcastle to give them a bit of a rattle at Stamford Bridge on Saturday. But the priority game is that cup game. You can't lose that cup game. The season, there's only 2 things Newcastle can win every year. They can't win the Premier League. They can win 2 cups, and this is a cup on the line. Newcastle need to be in the semi-finals, quarterfinals, semi-finals, finals of cups. And that gives you a lot of leeway as a club, as an ownership, as a manager, the squad. If you're making memorable days out for your fans, massive semi-finals in January in the Carabao Cup, or a trip to the final at the end of February, that kind of holds everyone together. It holds squad morale, gives optimism. There's hope there that something special could happen. And Newcastle need to keep that alive this year. They can't afford to lose against Chelsea, or it goes flat. And we're flat. As journalists, we then get flat about it. We haven't got the big games to cover. We're as depressed as the fans about it. We want to go to Wembley and go to these big semi-finals, and we need to see them. And Eddie Howe, he's got it to the position of being in big games, and he's got to get a track record now of the big game comes and those tactics are spot on. Everyone's got a job and executes it, and he needs to prove he's a big game coach as well.
It does seem a little bit doom and gloom.
Sorry.
No, not just you,
defeat to Brighton.
But in general, there does seem a little bit of a cloud hanging over St James's Park. I always say, that they're one defeat away from a crisis in terms of the reaction from certain fans, and obviously everyone's entitled to their opinion. But I look back at that game on Saturday, and I think, you know what, they're creating chances. They're just not scoring chances.
Yeah.
Defensively, they still look very, very strong. It was a mistake by Fabian Schär. Well, from the whole defence, really, Newcastle just were not organised, and that's got to be dealt with, and got to be ensured that does not happen again.
Mm-hmm.
But any other day, we would be talking about Newcastle winning 3-4-0 potentially. So I'm looking at it and thinking all the elements are there. It was just maybe one of those afternoons.
Yeah.
Of course, if I'm talking and saying the same thing in 3 or 4 games' time, then we'll have a problem. But I'm not sitting here thinking, goodness me, it's directionless. What's Eddie Howe doing? I'm still feeling quite optimistic about what's to come down the line. I don't know.
Yeah.
I
don't know if it's doom and gloom. I think there's been that 2 years of hope and optimism, and everything knitted together and everything aligning from the ownership and Amanda and Murdad talking and sparking up fans and a bit of unity and direction there. And then things have kind of dismantled a bit. And I think there's just worry. There's worry that it's not going as the path to the top. We knew it wouldn't be smooth, but we're wondering if it's really hitting a bump, or is it just a little bit of a bump? And it has hit a bump. It has to because of the PSR things, but has it hit a bump in terms of things not working on the pitch? Eddie losing a bit of magic in terms of uniting everyone. They not aligned at the top of the club with transfers. It's worry. And I think and that's why a home defeat to Brighton is kind of exaggerated, and we debate negative things rather than positive.
I think it goes back to transfers, doesn't it? Not having a big signing for 2 windows consecutive. That not only impacts the dressing room, but of course it impacts the fan base. They want to see new heroes. They want to see new players. They want to feel like the club are going in the right direction when they look around and seeing Villa, selling one player in who would the sell Juventus, the Brazilian midfielder, but then they replaced them and they've brought someone else in, and doing good business in the market. That's when Newcastle United should be, and they just haven't. And by not doing it, it does impact the mood, and therefore a defeat to whoever then gets exaggerated, because I think it just goes back to what happened in the summer when no one came in. So maybe that's why January is so important, the summer after. But as I said right at the start, it's much easier said than it is done.
I mean, they've got to get one big buy-in in January. They've got to spark it. They can't have 3 transfer windows, a year and a half, where they've not signed a ready-made first-team player.
How quickly
that would be terrible for Eddie Howe
to get it done within the first week as well?
You've got to. Deals are very rarely done in the first week of transfer. I mean, if it was the Gay one that they're revisiting, then they should be trying to do that, because everything's known for that.
you don't want to be waiting to the last 3 or 4 days.
You can't wait for Gay to the last 3 days again. If they're going to do Gay, they should say, this is what we offered. Here's our new offer. If you want it, we need to know by January the 5th. Oh, we're out of here. And then just stick to that. Because that's all decided. The negotiations have been had. They've been turned over in the summer on the negotiations. So, but if it's a mystery player, or if it's a strange target that we don't know, obviously you want them in early. But if you've got a sale agreed, that other club's going to want to be getting a replacement in if they haven't got a replacement ready. So it does take deals never get done quick. January the 1st opens, the window opens, and we're all excited, and nothing happens for like 26 days, and then we're at the last week, and we're waiting for the 31st, and it never happens early. But Newcastle need a deal to be done as early as possible. Enjoy.
Well, there we go. Certainly going to be an interesting January transfer window, but of course, plenty of football to be played before then. Thank you to Simon, as always, for popping on to the podcast. Thank you to you guys for watching and listening. Do remember to get your Nord VPN subscription. All the details are in the podcast description box. Thank you to Nord VPN for sponsoring the Everything is Black and White podcast. And for myself and Simon, we'll see you guys next week.